Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be stepping into the world of pharmaceutical research and development. Bringing a new medicine to market, it really takes a whole team.
Yeah,
And you've shared your interest in just how collaborative this process really is.
it really is fascinating.
Yeah, we're going to kind of go behind the scenes and really figure out how intricate that teamwork is.
Yeah, it's not just about having experts in each field. It's about how all of the experts actually work together. They're constantly sharing information and adjusting their approach as they go.
Right.
So it's very dynamic.
That makes a lot of sense. Our sources for this deep dive include a book about pharmaceutical product development, and I was surprised to learn that it takes 10 to 15 years to develop a new drug,
Wow.
and it costs hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge endeavor.
So with all of that time and money on the line, I can definitely see why teamwork is so important.
It really is. Think of it like an orchestra where each instrument has its own unique sound and role to play. And you need all the instruments, the strings, the brass, the percussion, all working together to create this beautiful symphony. And in drug development, our instruments are the chemists, the biologists, formulation scientists, the clinical researchers, the regulatory experts. The list goes on.
Okay, so let's break down this orchestra. Where do we even begin with such a complex process?
Well, the first movement usually starts with the chemists and biologists. They're kind of like our composers in a way.
Okay.
So the chemists, they're the ones discovering and synthesizing new drug compounds, the potential notes of our symphony. But just a single note doesn't make music, right?
Yeah.
We need to understand how those notes fit into a larger melody. That's where biologists come in, studying how those compounds interact with the body at a molecular level.
Okay, so we have our composers creating those notes. What happens next?
That's where the arrangers step in. And in the world of drug development, those are our formulation scientists. They take these promising chemical compounds and figure out how to turn them into a safe and effective medicine
Wow.
that patients can actually take. This is where we start thinking about things like tablets, capsules, injections, or even creams.
So it sounds like there's a lot more to it than just stuffing a chemical into a pill and calling it a day, right?
You're absolutely right. It's a common misconception that formulation is really simple. But these scientists are essentially drug delivery architects. They have to consider a whole range of factors: how the drug dissolves, how it's absorbed by the body, its stability, the best way to deliver it.
Yeah.
It's a very complex process.
Speaking of dissolving and absorbing,
Yeah.
one of our sources used a great analogy to explain that process, and they described it as being like watching a sugar cube dissolve in water,
That's a great way to visualize it.
but on a microscopic level.
Yeah. For a drug to be absorbed into the bloodstream, it first needs to dissolve in the fluids of the stomach and the intestines.
Right.
And even something seemingly as minor as the size of the drug particles can have a huge impact on how quickly it dissolves and is absorbed.
That's amazing. So how do they control the size of those particles?
Oh, there's some really clever techniques like micronization, where they use specialized equipment to grind the drug particles down into a very fine powder.
Oh, wow.
And then there's nanonization, which takes things a step further, creating particles that are incredibly tiny. We're talking on the nanoscale.
That's incredible. It sounds like formulation science is a truly specialized field.
It really is. They're like the unsung heroes of drug development. They're the ones ensuring that this promising compound actually reaches patients in a form that can actually help them.
Yeah, it's so important. So we've got our composers, we've got our arrangers. What comes after that?
Well, once we have a well-formulated drug product, it's time to move from the rehearsal room to the concert hall, so to speak.
Okay.
And that means entering the realm of clinical trials.
Right.
This is where our clinical trial specialists come in, and they're kind of like the conductors.
Okay.
They're bringing together thousands of patients and coordinating this very meticulous process of testing the drug's safety and effectiveness in humans.
Wow. It's incredible to think about the scale of those trials and the responsibility involved.
It is. It's a critical stage and requires immense precision and coordination.
Yeah.
They need to design the study carefully, recruit and retain those participants, collect and analyze data with the utmost rigor, all while ensuring the safety and well-being of everybody involved.
Right.
It's a complex symphony of its own.
It really is. And finally, once the performance is over, we need someone to critique it.
Right. Exactly. That's where our regulatory experts come in.
Yeah.
They're kind of like the reviewers, you could say. They work with government agencies like the FDA to make sure that the drug meets all of the necessary standards for safety, efficacy, and quality before it can be available to the public.
So it really is a long journey from those initial notes in the lab to the final performance on the pharmacy shelves.
It is, and it's important to remember that throughout that entire process, communication and collaboration is key.
Right.
These teams aren't working in silos. They're constantly sharing data. They're sharing insights. They're sharing challenges. They're refining the drug and its formulation along the way.
Yeah.
It's truly this dynamic dance of expertise, and it highlights just how essential team science is to the success of drug development.
I'm already seeing how that team aspect is crucial here.
Yeah.
It's not just one person or even one discipline that brings a new medicine to life.
No.
It's the combined efforts of all these different experts working together toward a common goal.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a testament to human ingenuity and our drive to improve health and well-being.
I love that.
Sure.
We've only just begun to scratch the surface of this process, and I'm already feeling the depth of the collaboration involved. But let's keep unpacking this further, shall we?
Absolutely. And speaking of teamwork, even the regulatory process involves a lot of back and forth between drug developers and agencies like the FDA.
Oh,
It's not just a one-way street.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, the FDA's job is to protect public health. So they need to be really sure that any new drug is both safe and effective.
Exactly. And that's where things like the biopharmaceutics classification system, or the BCS, comes into play.
Okay.
That can help streamline the approval process for certain drugs.
Okay, I've heard of the BCS, but I gotta be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Oh, sure.
Could you refresh my memory?
Yeah, think of the BCS as a way of categorizing drugs based on how well they dissolve in the body and how easily they're absorbed.
So it's like sorting drugs into different buckets based on their absorption characteristics.
You got it. There are 4 main buckets or categories in the BCS. The first category, case 1, is like the ideal scenario.
Okay.
High solubility and high permeability.
Okay.
These drugs dissolve easily and are readily absorbed.
Sounds like a dream come true for drug developers.
It certainly makes things a lot smoother. Drugs in this category often don't require very complex formulations to enhance absorption, which can save a lot of time and money during development.
I bet. What about the other categories? Are they more challenging?
They can be, yeah. Case 2 drugs, for example, have low solubility but high permeability.
Okay.
So they can be absorbed easily, but they kind of struggle to dissolve in the first place.
So it's like having a key that fits the lock perfectly, but you can't quite get it out of your pocket.
That's a great analogy. And in these cases, the formulation scientists, they have to get creative. They have to come up with strategies to enhance the drug solubility.
Right.
We talked about techniques like micronization and nanonization earlier. Those are often used for case 2 drugs.
So it's like giving the drug that little boost to help it dissolve and get into the bloodstream.
Exactly.
Okay. What about the other two categories?
Case 3 drugs are kind of the opposite of case 2. They dissolve easily, but have trouble crossing biological barriers to get absorbed. And then there's case 4, the most challenging category.
Yeah.
These drugs have both low solubility and low permeability.
Ouch. That sounds like a double whammy for those drug developers.
It definitely presents some hurdles, but even with those challenges, scientists are finding innovative ways to improve the absorption of those drugs.
It's amazing to see the level of ingenuity and persistence involved in this process.
It really is. And the BCS isn't just this theoretical framework. It has practical implications for drug regulation as well.
Oh, how so?
Well, for drugs that fall into that dream team category, case 1, with high solubility and high permeability, the FDA sometimes grants something called a bio-waiver.
The bio-waiver, what's that?
It essentially means that the drug developers don't have to conduct extensive clinical trials to prove that a generic version of the drug is equivalent to the brand name version.
So it's like a shortcut to getting a generic drug on the market.
You could think of it that way. But it's not a free pass. Drugs have to meet very strict criteria to qualify for a bio-waiver. They need to be highly soluble, highly permeable, and rapidly dissolving. Plus, they need to have a wide therapeutic window,
Okay.
meaning there's a big difference between the effective dose and the dose that might cause harmful side effects.
That makes sense. The FDA wants to be absolutely sure that the generic version will behave similarly to the brand name drug before giving it the green light.
Absolutely. And that's just one example of how the BCS influences the regulatory landscape. It's a really valuable tool for both drug developers and regulatory agencies, helping to streamline the approval process while maintaining those high standards for safety and efficacy.
It's fascinating to see how scientific understanding translates into real-world applications like that.
It really highlights the impact of team science.
Yeah.
The BCS wouldn't exist without the collaboration of all these researchers, regulators, industry experts, all working together to ensure that patients have access to safe and effective medications.
Speaking of access to medication, one of our sources mentioned this concept of the maximum absorbable dose, or MAD. What exactly is that?
The MAD is essentially the theoretical upper limit on how much of a drug can actually be absorbed by the body,
Okay.
and it's based on factors like its solubility and permeability.
So it's like a ceiling on how much of the drug can actually get into the bloodstream.
Exactly. It's like a theoretical maximum capacity for absorption. Knowing the MAD is really important during drug development, especially in the early stages.
Okay.
If the projected dose of a drug is way above its MAD, it's a red flag that absorption could be a major challenge.
So it's like a reality check for those drug developers, helping them prioritize compounds that are more likely to be successful.
Precisely. And it emphasizes that interconnectedness of solubility, permeability, and dose.
Yeah.
You could have a drug with fantastic permeability, but if its solubility is really poor, its MAD might be surprisingly low.
So it's a delicate balancing act, and the MAD helps to quantify those trade-offs. I imagine this is where those mathematical models you mentioned earlier come into play.
You're right. Mathematical models are incredibly valuable tools for understanding and predicting drug absorption.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to create a virtual version of the gastrointestinal tract, complete with all the fluids, the enzymes, and even those microscopic drug particles we talked about.
Wow, it's like a computer game for drug developers.
In a way, it is. These models use mathematical equations to describe these very complex physical and chemical processes involved in drug absorption. By plugging in specific values for things like solubility, particle size, permeability, scientists can actually simulate how a drug might behave in the body.
So it's like a virtual laboratory where they can test out different scenarios and tweak those various parameters.
Exactly. They can explore what-if questions. What if we reduce the particle size? What if we change the formulation? These models can help them predict how those changes might impact the drug's absorption and its overall journey through the body.
It sounds incredibly powerful. So they're essentially using math to predict the fate of a drug in the human body.
Precisely. And these models aren't just these static creations. They're constantly being refined and validated using real-world data from laboratory experiments. And this iterative process ensures that those models become more and more accurate and predictive over time.
It's amazing how technology is being used to enhance our understanding of such complex biological processes. It's like having a crystal ball that can peer into the future of a drug's journey through the body.
It really is. And these models don't just focus on absorption.
Okay.
They can also help predict a drug's distribution throughout the body, its metabolism, and its eventual elimination. It's like having a GPS tracker for the drug, allowing scientists to follow its every move.
This level of insight must be incredibly valuable for making informed decisions about dosage, frequency of administration, and potential drug interactions.
Absolutely. It allows scientists to really fine-tune that drug's therapeutic benefits while minimizing the risk of unwanted side effects.
And I bet this kind of modeling also helps with the regulatory process, giving the FDA more confidence in the safety and efficacy of these new drugs.
You're exactly right. Regulatory agencies are increasingly using mathematical models to evaluate new drug applications, which adds another layer of rigor to the approval process.
It's fascinating to see how all these pieces fit together: the science, the technology, the collaboration, and the regulatory oversight.
It's a complex ecosystem,
Yeah.
and it highlights the importance of teamwork and communication throughout that entire drug development journey.
We've talked a lot about solubility and permeability, but our sources also mention these intriguing proteins called transporters,
Yes.
which seem to play a crucial role in drug absorption as well.
Ah, yes, transporters. They're fascinating. You see, drug absorption isn't just about molecules passively diffusing across membranes.
Okay.
Transporters act like gatekeepers,
Okay.
actively controlling the movement of drugs into and out of cells.
So they're like tiny bouncers at the cell's entrance deciding who gets in and who gets turned away.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And just like bouncers, these transporters can be very selective.
Wow.
Some transporters, called uptake transporters, help drugs get into cells, while others, called efflux transporters, actually pump those drugs back out.
Oh, wow.
So it's like this tug of war between these opposing forces that determine how much of the drug ultimately gets absorbed.
That's so interesting. And the balance between uptake and efflux can vary depending on the drug,
Absolutely.
the type of transporter involved, and even individual differences in transporter expression.
Yeah, this adds another layer of complexity to drug development,
Wow.
as scientists need to consider how these transporter systems might affect a drug's absorption.
Sounds like understanding these transporters is crucial for predicting drug interactions as well.
Absolutely. Some drugs can compete for the same transporter, potentially altering each other's absorption.
Oh, wow.
A classic example is grapefruit juice, which inhibits a particular transporter involved in the metabolism of many drugs. So if you drink grapefruit juice while taking certain medications, it can actually lead to higher drug levels in your bloodstream, potentially causing those unexpected side effects.
Wow. I had no idea that grapefruit juice could have such a significant impact.
It's a great example of how seemingly unrelated factors can influence drug absorption through these complex transporter systems. And as we learn more about transporters, we're realizing that individual variations in transporter expression can also influence how people respond to medications.
That's fascinating. It really points to the personalized nature of medicine,
Yeah.
how different people can react to the same drug in different ways.
Precisely. And this understanding is pushing us towards more tailored treatment approaches, where we take into account an individual's unique genetic makeup and how that might affect their response to medications.
It's incredible to think about how far we've come in understanding the intricate processes involved in drug absorption. From dissolving sugar cubes to tiny molecular bouncers, it's been quite a journey so far. It really is mind-blowing when you think about all of those factors at play, even before a drug reaches its target in the body.
It is.
Like a whole cascade of events
Yeah.
has to happen just right.
It's a long journey.
It really is. Our sources delved into a specific equation that scientists use to model this process, and it's called the Noyes-Whitney equation.
Yes,
Sounds pretty technical,
it is.
but I'm curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, it is a bit technical, but it's a fascinating equation because it helps us understand the factors that influence how quickly a drug dissolves.
Okay,
It takes into account things like the drug solubility, the surface area of the drug particles, and the diffusion rate of those dissolved molecules.
so essentially it's quantifying that process
Yeah.
of a drug particle breaking down and spreading out into the surrounding liquid.
Exactly. And the beauty of this equation is that it allows formulation scientists to predict how changes in those factors might affect the dissolution rate.
Okay.
So, for instance, if you reduce the particle size of a drug, you increase its surface area, which generally leads to faster dissolution.
It's like having a mathematical blueprint for optimizing drug dissolution.
That's a great way to put it. And this understanding is so important for designing effective dosage forms. If a drug dissolves too slowly, it might not be absorbed efficiently, meaning the patient won't get the full therapeutic benefit.
Right.
But if it dissolves too quickly, it could lead to a rapid spike in blood levels, which could cause some unwanted side effects.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, that Goldilocks zone,
Yes.
where the drug dissolves at just the right rate for that optimal absorption.
Exactly. And the Noyes-Whitney equation gives those formulation scientists a really powerful tool to help them achieve that balance.
It's a beautiful example of how mathematical models can be used to understand and manipulate complex biological processes. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the collaborative nature of drug development to the intricate science behind drug absorption, it's been an incredible journey.
It really highlights the remarkable achievements of team science, doesn't it? The development of new medicines is a testament to human ingenuity and collaboration.
Absolutely. And it's clear that this team-based approach extends far beyond just the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, for sure.
Whether it's tackling climate change, developing new technologies, exploring the frontiers of space, the principles of team science collaboration, communication, integration of diverse perspectives, they're essential
Yeah.
for solving those complex challenges and driving innovation.
Couldn't agree more. And it's fascinating to think about how these principles could be applied in other fields. Imagine the possibilities if we could embrace this collaborative spirit in every aspect of our lives.
That's a wonderful thought to leave our listeners with. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of team science and drug development, we encourage you to consider what other areas could benefit from a more collaborative approach, and what unique challenges and rewards might arise from working together in those new frontiers. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.